Every day, billions of people type on a keyboard layout created before the telephone, before the light bulb, and long before computers existed. QWERTY, the 6 letters in the top left corner of nearly every keyboard on Earth. You might assume this layout was scientifically optimized for speed and efficiency. It wasn't. In reality, QWERTY survived through a bizarre combination of mechanical limitations, business strategy, historical accidents, and human habit. And once the world adopted it, escaping became almost impossible. This is the story of how a 19th century typewriter layout conquered the modern world. The story begins in the 1860s with Christopher Latham Sholes, a newspaper publisher and amateur inventor in Milwaukee. Sholes was trying to create a practical typewriter. His earliest keyboards were arranged alphabetically, which seemed logical at the time. But the design kept changing. Letters moved around constantly as Sholes experimented with different layouts and mechanical systems. By the early 1870s, the keyboard had evolved into something resembling modern QWERTY, though nobody yet realized it would become a global standard. At this stage, it was just one experimental machine among many. Everything changed in 1873, when Sholes sold the manufacturing rights to the Remington Arms Company. Yes, the gun manufacturer. Remington refined the machine and released the first commercially successful typewriter. And with it came a layout very close to modern QWERTY. There's even a strange theory that one key placement may have been adjusted so salesmen could type the phrase typewriter using only the top row during demonstrations. Whether that story is true or not, it reveals something important. QWERTY was not carefully engineered for perfection. It evolved through practical compromises, business decisions, and experimentation. But once Remington succeeded commercially, the layout started spreading everywhere. And success matters more than optimization. Today, the most famous explanation for QWERTY goes something like this. Early typewriters jammed if people typed too fast, so the keyboard was intentionally designed to slow typists down. It's a great story, but historians and researchers now believe it's mostly false. The layout actually places some very common letter combinations close together, which would make no sense if the goal was slowing people down. There's another problem too. In the 1870s, fast touch typing barely existed. The first famous touch typists appeared years later, so there weren't armies of super-fast typists causing constant jams in the first place. The evidence suggests QWERTY was not deliberately designed to sabotage speed. So where did it really come from? One of the strongest modern theories points to telegraph operators. Researchers studying the history of QWERTY found evidence that early telegraph workers may have influenced the layout. These operators had to quickly transcribe Morse code into text. Apparently, purely alphabetical keyboards were awkward for that job. According to this theory, QWERTY evolved gradually through user feedback, manufacturing compromises, and even patent disputes, not through one grand master plan. That's probably the most accurate way to understand QWERTY, not as a brilliant invention, but as a messy accumulation of historical accidents. But even if QWERTY was merely good enough, why did it become universal? The answer is economics. By the 1890s, Remington had already sold huge numbers of typewriters. Then, major manufacturers merged and standardized around QWERTY. At the same time, Remington trained typists to use their machines. This created a powerful cycle. Workers learned QWERTY. Businesses bought QWERTY machines. Schools taught QWERTY. Manufacturers produced QWERTY keyboards. And once enough people adopted the system, switching became expensive and inconvenient. Economists call this a network effect. A standard becomes more valuable simply because everyone else already uses it. And once that happens, replacing it becomes incredibly difficult. In 1936, a man named August Dvorak tried to replace QWERTY with something better. The Dvorak keyboard reorganized letters based on frequency of use. Common letters sat on the home row, reducing finger movement and, supposedly, increasing speed. Supporters claimed it was dramatically more efficient. Some studies even suggested typists could become much faster using Dvorak. This became one of the most famous examples of something economists call path dependence. The idea that society can get locked into inferior systems simply because they arrived first. But later research complicated the story. Some of the original Dvorak studies were flawed or biased, and when researchers repeated the tests, the advantage over QWERTY turned out to be surprisingly small, maybe only a few % faster. Not enough to justify retraining the entire world. So QWERTY survived again. Then computers arrived, and suddenly, every original mechanical reason for QWERTY disappeared. No type bars, no jams, no moving metal arms. This should have been the perfect opportunity to replace it. Instead, computers made QWERTY even stronger. By the 1980s, it was deeply embedded in personal computing. Software shortcuts depended on it. Schools taught it. Office workers relied on it. And retraining millions of people simply wasn't worth the cost. Even today, modern alternatives like Colmac remain tiny compared to QWERTY's global dominance. At this point, QWERTY survives not because it's perfect, but because it's universal. To conclude, the QWERTY keyboard isn't really a conspiracy. No villain secretly designed it to frustrate typists. The truth is more interesting than that. QWERTY emerged from telegraph operators, mechanical experiments, business deals, manufacturing compromises, and historical momentum. Then the world standardized around it. And once that happened, changing course became almost impossible. That's the real lesson of QWERTY. Not just how keyboards evolve, but how societies evolve. Accidents become habits. Habits become standards. And eventually, standards become so normal that nobody even remembers choosing them. The next time your fingers drift automatically toward QWERTY, remember, you're using a system designed in the 1870s and carried into the modern world by history itself. Thank you for watching.